This lecture accompanies the Durkheim reading. And by the way, you should be doing the readings before you listen to these lectures. I think you'll get a lot more benefit from doing that. Well, we're talking about theories of religion, anthropological theories of religion. Of course, there are lots of them, but I'm focusing only on two. First of all, I focus on cultural materialism primarily because it's been quite successful at explaining some of the more curious customs, religious customs. For example, the pork taboo in Islam and Judaism, and the beef taboo in Hinduism. And here I'm going to focus on another theoretical paradigm that has been quite successful in regard to our understanding of religion, and that's functionalism. And that's primarily associated with Durkheim. And this reading, even though it's sort of subtitled Durkheim Sociology, as you saw, primarily focuses on his theories of religion. So we're going to go over that here. So what I'm going to do is I've read back through the reading carefully and made a bunch of notes, and I'm just going to sort of go through my notes. So it's going to roughly follow the text, although I won't be citing page numbers as I did for Harris. All right, well, in the late 19th century, cultural evolutionism was all the rage. People were trying to apply the Darwinian evolutionary scheme to the development of culture. And as it proved not to be really successful, at least in helping us understand religion, it grew out of favor as being overly theoretical and just not data-based enough. Well, there was then a sort of swinging back of the pendulum towards a more empirical or data-based approach, and that was called historical particularism, where people began to focus on particular cultures and how they functioned and how they originated and so forth. And so that was a very intense sort of data collection kind of period. In fact, the year 1900 is a nice sort of marker to use as the time when field work became really important in anthropology. Field work, collecting data, etc. So it became more scientific, in other words, as of the year 1900. Well, as you might guess, it didn't take that long before we were just swamped with data and no way to explain it. Well, in comes functionalism in the early part of the 20th century as an attempt to try to make sense of all this data. We're going to focus on Durkheim's interpretation of functionalism. All right, just a few things. Durkheim was a sociologist, and he was also an atheist. It's never been my impression that he made a big deal out of it. It's almost as if he accepted it as just a natural, brute truth of nature, so to speak. And it wasn't really relevant to him, so he didn't really address it that much, regardless of what others may say. My impression is that it was not really much of an issue for him. He just dismissed it outrightly. But, of course, he is recognized as being one of the most significant, if not the most significant, theorist in regard to religions. So clearly, being an atheist did not affect his ability to understand and interpret the religious life of Homo sapiens. Interesting quote he makes towards the beginning of the article: religion tends to embrace smaller and smaller portions of social life as society evolves. And actually that's true. In smaller tribal societies that he referred to as mechanical, all of the parts are intimately interrelated to one another. There's a common belief system. There's a socially homogeneous sort of social structure. Everyone is on the same page, in other words, ideologically, politically, religiously, etc. But as society evolves, it becomes more of an organic sort of thing. That's Durkheim's terminology. And you will get various pieces that still all function as part of a composite whole, but they're sort of interdependent. And you also get a lot more ideological, political, and religious diversity in larger societies. And so religion, as he said, religion will tend to embrace smaller and smaller portions of social life, particularly as other aspects of society, for example, politics, science, and so forth, become divorced from religion. Look what happened, after all, during the age of the Enlightenment, when people began to turn to science, also called the Age of Reason. People began to turn to science for answers regarding the workings of the natural world as opposed to religion. He also prefers not to explain social facts by considering individual or psychological factors. He pretty much dismissed those. And that's because in his mind, social facts are external to and constrain individual behavior. So his primary focus in regard to understanding religion and society is society itself, not the individual. Then the article moves into a discussion of Durkheim's most famous work and one of the classics in the field of the study of religion, titled The Elementary Forms of the Religious Life, published in 1915. You read there that Durkheim is not really interested or concerned about the truth or falsity of religious claims or beliefs or dogma, because in fact he saw these as being instrumentally false anyway. In other words, they didn't really explain anything about the real world. Today we would say that they're not falsifiable, meaning pretty much the same thing. But on the other hand, just because he dismissed out of hand the content or the truth value of religious claims, beliefs, and dogmas, as a sociologist, he realized that religion was way too ubiquitous, too widespread to be based simply on an illusion, as Sigmund Freud posited. In other words, there must be something there. There must be some function that religion has. So it can't be dismissed. There's a famous quote from Durkheim, and it starts like this, quote, "In reality there are no religions which are false. All are true in their own fashion." Well, that is the secret to understanding Durkheim. So what does it mean for an atheist to say basically that all religions are true? Well, what he means is that they're all functional in their given cultural context. That last part is essential. They're all functional in their given cultural context, right? They basically meet the needs of the people who embrace them. They seem reasonable to the people who embrace them. And just in general terms, as I said, they are functional within the societies where they're practiced. Now, that would not be the case if you were to take any one of these religions and place it in a different society. Then that whole model breaks down. But what we have here is a very modern view, a very modern take on religions. And if you recall, in the chapter 12 reading from my textbook in anthropology, it's one of the first readings we did, I spoke of three functions of religion: the cognitive, the existential, and the social. Well, clearly here he's focusing on the social function of religion. And his definition of religion echoes a lot of these sentiments. It reads, quote, "A unified set of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things, that is to say, things set apart and forbidden, beliefs and practices which unite one single moral community, all those who adhere to them." So as we can see here, religion is sort of like a social glue. It binds everyone together into a single, quote, single moral community. And not surprisingly, Durkheim gives us his own theory regarding, let's say, the origin of divinity, when he writes that God is basically a figurative expression of society. In other words, divinity has a social origin. So first came society, then came people's attempt to objectify society, give it some sort of ontological status. After all, society is the holder, quote unquote, of all things good, of customs, practices, morals, etc. And God quite easily fills that spot. So divinity has a social origin, according to Durkheim. He discusses rituals, which are extremely important, because rituals basically have the authority of the social group. And it's through rituals that the authority of the social group is asserted. And he also notes that religious rituals are the primary mechanism whereby the sentiments and solidarity of the social group are expressed. So rituals are very, very important, again, especially in the smaller tribal so-called organic societies, mechanical societies, where everyone is pretty much on the same page in regard to religions, or I should say religion.